Thank you for coming on to the Motion Sim Builders YouTube channel. It's rather small compared to your channel, and I want to say congrats on your channel. Your channel has been so fun to watch grow. And in celebration of your channel passing the 1,000 mark, let's jump in the DeLorean and go back to the Wayback Machine.
Oh boy.
So take us back. I know I covered this with Jeff, but what was your tickle to get you into gaming? I mean, let's go back
Holy crap.
about 30 years ago. What was it?
Well, legitimately, probably the start of it was when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I remember my mom is a huge bowler. She's going to be 86 in a couple of weeks, and she's still full of, fire and drives and all that stuff. But I remember being a kid, and she would hold me up at the pinball machines. Now, at that age, we didn't even have video games.
Yeah.
Pinball was it.
Sure.
And I remember on her knee at the bowling alley, and I would run the flippers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my earliest recollection of gaming. But, I'm part of the first gen of gamers because we didn't really have video games back then.
Yeah.
The video games we had were, there were little dots and you had to have two
Pong.
players.
Yeah. Pong.
There was no AI. It was like, okay, well, here you drive this car around and there's maybe some robot cars, or there were two tanks and somebody had to have tanks. But I remember that. And then, obviously I'm a Star Wars nerd. I mean, I love that movie was such a huge thing.
Yeah.
And so just the whole sci-fi and the video games, and we were fortunate. We had a Pong. You mentioned Pong. We had a Pong set up on our house.
Yeah.
Old, console type thing. And then I remember when we got the Atari 2600, that was at Christmas, and we got it. And the way we got it, we talked my dad into the blackjack. He loved gambling, and so the blackjack cartridge. It's like, Dad, if you get this, you can play blackjack on the TV. Of course, there was ulterior motive there to all the others. But I remember that thing was like, you could actually, instead of Pong where you had your built-in games, you can pull a cartridge out, put one in.
That's right.
Which sounds so stupid. Anybody watching this is generally like, what's the big deal?
Right, what are you talking about?
At the time, being able to take a different game or go out to the store and buy a whole new game without buying a whole new console was amazing.
Yeah, and that was my generation. I was late 70s, early 80s, ColecoVision, Atari back in the day. So.
Yeah. And I remember, so there were a couple of big ones. Night Driver, I don't know if you remember that, but all it was lines. Yep. And you used the paddle and you tried to stay between the lines. Mm-hmm. That started my racing fix. There was one called like Starship. So there's three things I love. I mean, racing, obviously, I love racing. And then also I love flight. So I'm really into flight stuff, and then space sims. So those are like that's my trinity of what I really enjoy. And so there was a game called Starship where all it was a few dots flying at you, and you had to avoid asteroids. I mean, it was real basic, but I played that for hours, and just your brain takes you away. Having seen Star Wars, you just go into this, hey man, this is gonna be great. And now you jump into Elite Dangerous, and it's all real in VR. It's crazy. But that's really the start of it, and start of the video games, and then the sim stuff where I really got into sim was, again, I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and I remember. Again, for you young folks, we didn't have the internet or anything. So I'd have all my Star Wars comic books, and I would draw out what I could see was like the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, all the controls. So I'd just draw the buttons on a piece of paper, and I'd go in my treehouse, paste it on the wall, and I'd pretend I was flying. I mean, it's just a piece of paper with buttons. Yeah, but that was it. I mean, I loved Sims from such an early age. And so once the age of computers came along and we could start doing that, and I progressed from the 2600. My next one was the Commodore 64. Yep. That was my first computer. So I went down that track. And I think I had the first flight sim was Flight Sim 2. Yep. And I mean, really, like one frame every 5 seconds. It was bad.
Yep. FPS was real bad.
But I remember taking off from Chicago and seeing like the Sears Tower. And it was like, it was a block with two sticks out of the top, but it was still like, hey, I'm flying. Sure. So, that all kind of progressed and got there. And so it's just amazing to watch all that. And then I think after that, I just stayed involved in computers, went to the Amiga. I'm an Amiga guy. So the old Commodore Amiga had one of those original Amiga 1000s. And there was a game on there that I absolutely loved. It was called Stunt Car Racer, I think.
Okay.
And I don't know if you probably have never heard of it. It was a kind of an obscure one, but it was so cool. So you're in this kind of a homemade rig. I mean, picture like a hot rod, just a chrome alloy frame. You could actually see the engine in front of you. When you hit the turbo, the flames come out of the zoomy pipes. And basically you were on a track that had jumps and stuff. And it was really early polygon stuff, but you actually felt like you're in the car. And then whenever you'd like land, you'd see a little crack on the frame. So
like rally car racing. I love it.
It was like that. And I mean, real basic. And what was amazing back then, this was the crazy thing. If your buddy had one, you could actually hook up through a serial cable. Yep. And you could race each other. Like you'd see his car, which again, this is, what?
Way back. This is 40 years ago.
Yep. Yeah. And so that, again, with internet, it's nothing now, but back then it was amazing.
Yeah. Cutting edge.
Yeah. And then, getting into the Amiga, and I progressed to a 2500, which had a little bit faster processor. I got into this game called FA-18 Interceptor, which just blew me away. So with the faster chip, it was not one frame every 5 seconds. It was probably about a frame a second or so. Yeah. So that was the first time I actually ever really felt like the flight was, smooth enough that it was doing anything. But it just kept going. I mean, and I've always liked the combination of man and machine, and working with the machine to, whatever, to compete, to race, to dogfight. For some reason, that's always just intrigued me, and I've always just had a passion for any of that human machine interface kind of stuff.
It's funny you mention that, because for me, I love Illusion. Like I love David Copperfield.
Okay.
And when VR came out, it was a game changer for me, because I'm like, we are now putting Illusion in the hands of people that can, like, I can trick people to make them feel like they're doing something they're not.
Oh yeah.
And that was when I got the hook where I'm like, I need to get a simulator. So I was part of the original Oculus DK1 Kickstarter. So back when Oculus was owned by Facebook. So and it was kind of funny, because that first product, when I got it, it came in a Pelican case. It was really, I was blown away with the packaging. I had a big screen. Screen was like this on it, and and you couldn't, like, you could still see a parallel, like it wasn't total VR.
Yep.
They didn't really get it right until the second DK2 was better, but then the CV1 they really kind of got it really good. You put it on and you were fully immersed.
Yeah.
And at that point, like, when I jumped in my sim, my P3, and I had it pretty well tuned. I put my dad in it. My dad's in his 70s, and he was like completely, like, he got out of it, like his knees were wobbly, and I felt like Copperfield, because I'm like, I tricked him. I'm like, he felt like really in that car, like he was really driving around that McLaren at 140 miles an hour. So,
without having to pretend. I mean, with the early sims, we're always like, okay, you had to kind of just suspend your disbelief and be like, okay, I know I'm flying. That was the first time I remember flying DCS in the F-18 in VR, and I remember for a split second I felt like I was I truly thought I was in the airplane.
Yeah.
I mean, and exactly. And it's kind of cool. My first VR experience was way back. You probably don't remember this. There was a game called Pterodactyl Terror or something like that. And it was an arcade game where you had the big rings. This is back in the 90s. And we were lucky living in Colorado. There was a one in Boulder. Yeah. And we went there, and big old huge headsets, and I mean monster setup, and really rudimentary graphics. But I remember that was my first VR experience ever, and I got in this thing, and I'm holding my hand in front of me, and I'm tilting it, and it's tilting. I mean, it's just a polygon. Yeah. And I look down, and I can see my body, and if I tilt my head, my view's shifting, and it blew me away. Whoa. And from that point, and then that was what we say 90s, and so. You're like, 5 years from now, this will be in every home. Try 25, 30 years from now.
Cell phone. You think about the old bag phones. That was 30 years ago. It was 30 years ago. You had a bag phone in your car, or a cell phone mounted in your car. Like that was the thing. Like my kids don't understand that. I'm like, cell phones were installed in cars. Yeah, and it's funny too, because you mentioned back in the 90s, like my brother worked at a small theme park near our house. And they had a sim machine there. There was one that you actually got into, and it sat like 6 people, and you could do the roller coaster.
The one like in the mall?
Yeah, kind of like a mall one, yes.
Yep.
And it was funny because they had at the time, and this was the game that kind of changed it for me. It was the Atari hard driving machine. It was actually a sit down, had the adjustable seat, wheel shifter, and clutch. And they had 2 versions of it. It was Atari hard driving, and then they had a second version that came out. This is like mid to late 90s, probably 97, 98, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And I used to get in that arcade game, and I'd be like, if they could mix this game with that big simulator outside, I'm like, this would be really rad.
Now, hard drive, correct me if I'm wrong. That was the one where you had the option, you could go through the loops,
correct,
and stuff, or there was like a G. There was a G pad you could go.
The one, yep.
I chucked quarters into that thing just like you did.
Probably $100 easily.
$100 an hour.
I mean, I know.
I'm right there with you. I remember that. I remember loving that game.
Yep.
I mean, it's again real basic. And you're right. Back then, it's like, yeah, if we could. And then we obviously the step of the force feedback steering wheels came in.
Right.
And it's like, man. And so now that we've got it, it's like everything's finally come together to give us, about as good an experience as we could have ever dreamed of.
The last 6 years have been rapid.
Well, no, I mean, that's the thing. I grew up, like you said, with the old simulators in the malls. And, it's another quick story. You always ask me how I started. So the first time I went to Disneyland and did Star Tours, and I was probably 10 years old or somewhere in that zone. I remember after that, and I remember thinking, all right, how at home can I rig up a cockpit and have TIE fighters zooming by and I mean, I'm thinking, okay, like some sort of pinwheel or,
right.
I'm like my 10-year-old self is trying to figure out how can I have that experience at home?
Yeah.
And I never thought I would. I mean, I honestly, I've had the chance to use other simulators and stuff, but these things are so expensive. I'm like, there's no way I'll ever. And then I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I think I can afford a seat mover. I think I can get something that I can at least, because what I determined was, getting off the floor, even if it's just the subtlest movement, the difference and the immersion from just being moved and not feeling you're sitting at your desk, even if it's just minor movement, was a huge step.
Oh, sure.
So it's like just having a little bit that disconnects you, makes you feel like you're in a vehicle.
Yep.
Your brain, like you said, the illusion.
Yeah.
Your brain goes, oh, okay, I'm in a vehicle now. And so I was looking at that. And then when I found the DOF thing, I'm like,
wait a minute, game changer.
How can I get this for no, okay, there's a 1 missing in front. Or, this can't be right. How can it be for that price? Because of so much you're getting.
Yeah. It's funny I mentioned that too. The one thing that I will say, anyone that has seasonal depression, my simulator has vastly helped my seasonal depression because I can put on a headset and jump in a car topless and go cruise down, the 405 in California, and I feel like I'm really there. It's awesome.
So I got a story similar to that. So during COVID, obviously we couldn't go anywhere and everything. Right. So what I would do, I actually jumped in my rig and I popped a flight from like Miami down to the Caribbean because we love going to the Caribbean.
Nice.
And so I jump into like a, prop, two prop plane, and I just take an hour and a half, 2 hour, whatever, and I just fly it. And it's real casual. It's, there's no massive stuff.
Yep.
But exactly what you're talking about. I haven't been out of the house in a year and a half or whatever, but I get in this thing and I'm flying to the Caribbean and the sun's coming up.
Yep.
It helps so much. Exactly what you're talking about.
It really does.
And I remember one time I remember I was flying, I'd been in the flight for a little bit, and I looked over at the seat. I'm like, Brenda is my better half.
Yeah.
I'm like, why isn't Brenda with me on this trip? You're in VR.
No, that's funny. That's when you know it's working.
Oh yeah, it totally, because you're kind of lost in thought and you're in the clouds and everything. And I'm like, it's like, why didn't Brenda come with me? And I'm like, you're in a computer, you idiot.
So before we wrap it up, so I got to ask, so what made you jump in on the YouTube adventure? I mean, because obviously your channel, it's growing like crazy, and congrats again. So what made you? Wow. I'm curious.
Okay, so this is hilarious. So we got the motion, we got the H6, and we got it in
2 years, 2.5 years.
It's about a year and a half now. I think we got it. Yeah, we built it.
You're just a rookie. You just
yeah. We're trying to make it up in miles though. We might be behind on time, but boy, we're throwing money and time.
My bug box and let you work on that for a little while.
Yeah. Well, so here's the trick. I have the vision, but all right. So I can turn a wrench, but I'm not a mechanic.
Yeah.
I built my own race cars and stuff like that and all that. But I've got a guy, his name's Daryl Delac, and I call him the master fabricator, so he can make anything happen. You know the type.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like toward the garage, you'd laugh.
Yeah, so I'll be like, this is what I want to do. And it usually starts with, man, I don't think we can do that. And I let him think about it, and then every time.
That guy, that's right.
He figures it out. It's like he figures it out. So I have the vision. I know what I'm looking for, but he's the guy that implements it. But so the way this channel all started was I was taking pictures of all the stuff we're doing because we're doing a fair amount of customizing. We kind of have in our head what we want to do with the DOF unit, and we're doing some customizing and all that. So I'm taking pictures and kind of documenting some of it. And I'm going to do a blog post, right? I'm going to get on DOF Reality Builders and just do a blog post. This is what I'm going to do. And Daryl goes, why don't you do a YouTube video of this? He's like, you've got all this video, you're doing all this. Why don't you just do it? And I remember I looked at dead in the eye and I went, nobody's going to care what I have to say. Nobody's going to ever watch this. Why would I make, I mean, who am I?
Yep.
And I was pleasantly proved wrong by him, because here we go. We got, people coming and
Sure.
And cool, it's a cool community. It's not a
What's
bunch
incredible
of trolls.
too, you mentioned the community again. I can't get over how global it is.
Oh yeah.
I've met people literally on the other side of the planet, and good people, like guys, like friends. It's so cool. I mean, it's so cool. And what I love too, I mean, I'm not a massive Facebooker. I'm driven in and out by the groups that I maintain, but I love how you can use the translate and communicate with anybody. I mean, how awesome is that? I mean, it's a really cool, tool. So,
yeah. Shelmer on the group, I think he's in Spain. I've got another guy, he's older, and he was interested in building a system. He's from New Zealand. I've, Aussies all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, and then England, and then Germany's big time. I mean, obviously this kind of stuff, Germans love this kind of stuff. And so and here's what surprised me the most about starting the YouTube channel. And I'm with you, Facebook, I could care less. I am not a Facebooker. We kind of both grew up in the age of Big Brother, and to me, Facebook is voluntary Big Brother. I've always had that opinion. So I'm not a big Facebook fan. But the group is a totally different thing. I'm a big fan of the Facebook group.
It's crazy how that works, right?
Yeah, because it's not everybody. It's our community, and it's people that are cool and courteous and all have a goal versus just anybody spewing whatever they want to say. But what surprised me most about the YouTube channel was how much the comments. I mean, I figured there'd be comments, but man, that is such a key driver. When you do a YouTube channel, you got to stay on those comments. And I enjoy that. I enjoy the back and forth that I have with the people that watch my channel. Again, I'm thankful for each and every single one of them that takes, 10 minutes out of their day to watch what I'm saying.
Yep. So,
well, anybody that made it this long, thank you guys for sticking around. Right. Really, really appreciate it. Yep. And, Dave, again, I want to thank you for starting this mess. Like Jeff said,
I know
starting these groups and starting these channels. It's a great thing. And I love the direction that you're going with your content. I love that. I really enjoy it.
I definitely have made quite a few wallets bleed. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, jeez. Well, yeah, but it's in such a good way. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot worse stuff to spend your money on.
There is.
So I always think that. But anyways, I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you inviting me over and getting to share some of my thoughts and stuff. And again, if you want to do this in the future or you want to do a live one,
careful what you ask for. Careful what you ask for.
No, I'm good. I love it. This is the stuff I love. I love doing this. So.
All right. Thanks guys for watching. We really appreciate it.